Welcome to my channel on the best of fantasy. Today I am reviewing The Shadow of the Gods. This is book 1 of the Bloodsworn Trilogy by John Gwynne, and this will be a spoiler-free review. Now, if you've been following the channel, you know that I recently finished reading the 4 books of The Faithful and the Fallen. And in addition to that, I was doing a collaborative discussion of each book with several other booktubers, including Patrick Leo and Alan from the Library of Alexandria, and Abby Salter and Alex Nieves. And for the finale, which appeared on Patrick's channel, we had the wonderful opportunity to speak to John Gwynne. And it was mostly about The Faithful and the Fallen, mostly about Wrath, which we had all come together to discuss. But we also did talk a little bit about The Shadow of the Gods, because we're all very excited about it, and a couple of us have read it. And so, yeah, we had a few little tidbits of information there. So I do recommend that if you're interested, that you check out that discussion on Patrick's channel. I will put a link in it to it in the description below. But I want to say right off the bat, having read The Faithful and the Fallen now, and I will be reading A Blood and Bone. This is Gwynne's other series. It's a trilogy set in the Banished Lands, I think 150 years later or something like that, after the Faithful and the Fallen. Having read The Faithful and the Fallen, though, I must say that so far, this is my very favorite thing that John Gwynne has written. I have a lot of reasons for this, and I want to explain it, but I would compare the two in some respects. The Faithful and the Fallen being a Celtic and partly Roman-inspired series, and The Faithful and the Fallen, the Shadow of the Gods, the beginning of the Bloodsworn Trilogy, being a Viking-inspired story. So this is, I love both, frankly. I love the Celtic connections and the Roman ones, and I absolutely love the Viking ones. But I do think that overall, one of the main reasons why I believe this is going to be John Gwynne's very best is because I think his writing has just gotten even better. Now, there is a lot of great things to say about his writing in The Faithful and the Fallen, but it's gotten even better. And I do think that the Norse style, the Saga style, is something that really suits him. And I'm going to explain a little bit. Just as a little background, I myself am my PhD is in English literature, but I am a medievalist, and I specialize in Old English literature, have read a lot of sagas as well, and I've studied Old Norse, I've translated some sagas on my own, nothing published, and a bit from the Prose Edda or Snorri's Edda as well. So I have some knowledge of the sagas, and I want to say that more than any other modern fantasy, John Gwynne's Shadow of the Gods reminds me of sagas. And so I'm just going to explain what I have to say about sagas. Is almost all of it is applicable in some way or other to the Shadow of the Gods, which I thoroughly enjoyed reading. This is my favorite thing by John Gwynne. And it's really interesting because Gwynne does use Icelandic in the book. And it's Icelandic, as many of you may know, is the closest Scandinavian language to Old Norse, the language of the Vikings. In fact, modern people in Iceland can pretty much read the sagas without too much difficulty. This is very different from English, which has changed a lot in the same time span. So it's cool that he uses Old Norse. I grooved out on that, and I had my Old Norse dictionary out to and a lot of the times though, what is in Old Norse will be translated somewhere nearby by another character or the same character. Not always, but in many cases it is. So that's kind of fun. And stylistically as well, there are certain echoes of the sagas in here. And of Old English as well. I'm going to talk about Beowulf a bit too. But there are kennings in here, like thought cage for mind and that sort of thing. You'll see Gwynne using these kennings, they're called in Old English and in Old Norse. These are compound words put together in a very poetic way. So I love it. I love that Gwynne has these little stylistic echoes in here, and I love that he has the Old Norse in here. But it goes beyond that as well. there is a thematic similarity too. I want to describe a little bit the Icelandic sagas, and in doing so, I think I'm describing the Shadow of the Gods on some level. So for me, Icelandic sagas are the best medieval literature, period. European medieval literature, the best you can find would be the Icelandic sagas. I'm sure someone would want to argue about that, but for me, that is definitely the case. They are stark, and they are bare, and they are austere. They are minimalist in many ways. The prose, the description is very minimalist. Before minimalism was a thing, the Icelandic sagas were minimalist. It really, these sagas really epitomize the whole show don't tell mantra before it was a mantra. And so it's just brilliant. I mean, in some ways they're the earliest novels. And they almost always have an objective narrator. In other words, the narrator doesn't tell you the inner feelings of the characters. The narrator simply tells you on a physical level what happens. And this means that the reader will have to sort of figure out what emotions are going on. But there is a kind of violence that is simmering beneath the surface, a tension that is constantly there in the sagas. And it will at times erupt, and it can be very sudden and abrupt and very destructive. And so this is something that you do see as well in The Shadow of the Gods. And you also have a kind of grim humor that accompanies this sense of constantly simmering potential violence. And you have a sort of understatedness to it. This is something that Icelandic sagas share with Beowulf. In fact, there's a term for a Greek word, leitites, understatement. Something you see in The Shadow of the Gods as well. Gwynne does this stuff really well. Is there all these wonderful nods to this old material. And I think it's just something that makes The Shadow of the Gods very special. For me, especially, because since I'm so invested in that kind of literature. But there's also this sense of doom hanging over the story. And this has to do with the idea of fate, but also the idea of mustering the courage to do something about it, or the best you can anyway. And the scale in Icelandic sagas tends to be smaller. A lot of modern fantasy is like epic, big scale, huge battles, and lots of POV characters, and just kind of overwhelming, and that's great. I love that sort of thing too. I enjoy reading, series that are massive, like, the Stormlight Archive and the Malazan Book of the Fallen, and A Song of Ice and Fire. I mean, that's all great stuff. But the sagas have a smaller scale. And they're more personal in a sense. If you read Egil's Saga or the Saga of Grettir the Strong, you'll see that these are misfits and outcasts who are at odds with the society around them. And these are individuals who perform great deeds, but are also capable of very destructive violence. There's a sort of berserker rage that is always lurking in their blood. And this probably leads to the sense of a large tragedy that pervades Icelandic sagas. They're very tragic in nature. A sense of, as I said before, succumbing to fate, and also the worship of courage in the face of certain doom. I love this sort of thing, and this is a favorite theme, of course, as well in Old English literature, with Beowulf, which simultaneously has quotes that are, you would think, at odds with one another. At one point in Beowulf, it says, "Gath a weird swa he shall," which means fate ever goes as it must, which gives a sense of that it's inescapable, perhaps. But in the very same poem, it also says, "Oft weird nereth unfeine erlthone his ellen deach," which means something like, often fate spares an undoomed man or warrior when his courage holds. So the idea there being that maybe you can do something about it if you have enough courage. Meet it with enough courage. And you see that in the Icelandic sagas, and you see it in The Shadow of the Gods as well. The same theme of courage in the face of certain doom. And I absolutely love it. Other themes that you see in there as well will be familiar from Beowulf and the sagas. There's courage and there's the worship of glory. seeking glory in order to make a name for oneself. And there's loyalty, and there's kinship, and there is vengeance. The obligation to obtain revenge for one's slain kin is a big motivating force in a lot of the plots in Icelandic sagas. It's huge in Beowulf, and is definitely there in the Shadow of the Gods as well. So this is really great stuff. And of course, let us not forget the monsters and the dragons. So Gwynne does not forget these either. He also adds a very interesting pantheon to the mix, I would say, as well as a very interesting magical system that I really enjoyed. I'm not going to say too lot about it because I don't want to give any spoilers here. Everything I'm saying so far is really on the description on the inside, in my case, on the arc. On this little bit here, I imagine it's probably going to be on the back page when you buy it. But so yeah, I'm avoiding the spoilers. But the magic system is very cool. I enjoyed it. It's soft magic. Gwynne doesn't go into huge detail. It's not elaborate, but I really like what he does with it. And the gods are alluded to in the title of the book, and they're also described in that little description a wee bit. And there is basically the gods have had a almost world-ending, world-rending conflict, much like Ragnarok. This took place about 300 years before the story takes place. So that is a kind of a background to this, and it is also very much tied to the magical system. So very like Ragnarok, another great echo from Viking times. So the gods have their legacy, in other words, and their shadow is indeed hanging over the story. And the shadow of their presence is very much a part of the narrative. So great stuff. I would also like to comment briefly on how wonderfully I enjoyed the setting in The Shadow of the Gods. There are some great settings in this story. I can't say too much about them because, again, spoiler free. But let's just say that I really loved what John Gwynne does with Snakavik and the Boneback Mountains. Very unique and I would say very cinematic, epic, really good stuff. I mean, Gwynne is not afraid, even though a lot of the saga vibe is understated, Gwynne is not afraid to go for some really big cinematic moments in here as well. So I just really enjoyed that, as what he brought to this. Also love the fact that we have in here 3 perspective characters, 2 women, 1 man, and they are all in their own way very grim, very determined in the tradition of the sagas. So there's Orca and Elvar and Varg, and I absolutely loved getting to know each one of them. This is a more intimate book than the 4 books of the Faithful and the Fallen, for sure, because you only have the 3 POV characters, and I love that. I think it's great. It's maybe a difficult thing to pull off, and Gwynne does it really well. In fact, I feel that these 3 POV characters are more psychologically developed than any character in The Faithful and the Fallen. And I loved the characters. I was weeping over the characters in The Faithful and the Fallen, so I'm just saying that as a huge compliment. I think he's done a great job with these POV characters and many of the supporting characters as well. You have some vivid characters in here, and they just kind of pop. They could have popped right out of a saga, many of them. So absolutely great with the psychological depth. Even though we don't have a narrator who gets too much in the saga style, Gwynne does sometimes report the feelings of the characters, but he does take his cues from the saga style, and basically we infer a lot of the emotional state of these characters from their actions, and it's just fantastic. So I just thoroughly enjoyed The Shadow of the Gods. Huge thumbs up from me. I am really excited. The bad thing is now I'm gonna have to wait until the next book, on book 2, comes out of the Bloodsworn Trilogy. So at least I will have a Blood and Bone to read in the meantime. I'm very much looking forward to that. But boy, am I excited for this trilogy, Bloodsworn Trilogy. I think it's going to be Gwynne's masterpiece here. I really do. And I am very, very excited to be reading it. So that's it for me on The Shadow of the Gods. Perhaps a little bit different from other reviews with my Old Norse interests and background, but that is what he made me think about, and he did such a wonderful job of it. So thank you for listening, and until next time.